probably like put something on like
TW.
The front of all of this.
Trigger warning, we're going to be talking about SA and, a lot of stuff around that. So that's the big thing. And I guess a little bit of murder. Here we are. So.
I got to pull up my research.
Oh my god.
I got a lot of it.
There's a lot to be said about this. And there's a lot that we don't know.
And there's a lot we don't want to talk about.
Yeah. So. Just Google Danny Masterson if you want a lot of the details, I guess.
Well, I think I can probably do like a brief little intro, and then the gory details you're just gonna have to like, or conspiracy theories, because there are a lot of them around this. Like you're gonna have to like Google that yourself because it's a minefield. Essentially, there's this man, Danny Masterson. He's 47 now, and he got his like big break on That 70s Show. Did you watch that show? I didn't watch that show.
A couple times. Like, I wasn't religiously. It took place in Stevens Point, or it was fictitiously in a small town in Wisconsin. It wasn't actually, but it's supposed to take place in small town Wisconsin, which is where we grew up.
Yeah.
So that's like a draw for Wisconsinites to watch it.
Right.
And it was him, Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher, a couple other people, but those are Topher Grace.
Yeah.
Most of those people come back up in some of these stories.
Sure.
And then
Chrissy Bixler.
So like all these people got their start. Like they were very young. Mila Kunis was 14 starting that show.
Yeah. She actually lied to producers about her age in order to get her on the show, because I think they said she had to be something like 16, and she lied and she was actually 14.
That makes sense.
Very young.
Think about like, I worked when I was 15 and a half. There are all sorts of regulations and stuff for like child labor.
Right.
And like you're going to school, like it's a lot, you know? So I remember you telling me that years ago, like Mila Kunis was actually 14. She lied about her age, or something, like maybe her parents did or her agent did or whatever to get her on the show.
I think it might have, I don't know, whatever.
You've told me that
story
before.
Around it, yeah.
Yeah, there's a story around that.
Not so great. Danny Masterson was convicted of
the R word.
He was convicted of the R word.
Yeah.
Which we can't say because we're going to post this to YouTube, and YouTube won't allow us to say the actual word. But he was convicted of that, and he was recently sentenced to 30 years to life for his crimes.
Which is a lot. He's a white man who's wealthy, who's in Hollywood, and he's being sentenced with 30 years to life for two counts of this crime.
Yeah, he was convicted of 2. There were 3 that he was tried for, and the 3rd resulted in a mistrial and was dismissed from that mistrial.
And that was
Chrissy.
That was Chrissy that didn't have her case.
So hers was a mistrial. So it wasn't necessarily that he didn't do it, but they mistrialed it. And then I think she's expressed her intention to continue to pursue him to the extent of the law, which I think at this point is like civil court. I'm
sure he has some sort of holdings.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's got money, but anyway, so another notable thing about Danny Masterson is that he is a pretty prominent Scientologist, as is his wife, who stood beside him while he went through court proceedings, and I think is still up until now, while we're filming this, defending him and supporting him. So yeah, really heavy, really awful things. I read through, like, to prepare to have this conversation, I read through like some of the details, and it's really awful and like really, really hard to read everything that happened to these women. And then also should note that he has more accusers than that. So
these are just the ones that went through the entire trial process.
Yeah. So there were 2 that went through, and he was convicted of the crime. And then there have been others that have accused him and have not gone through that legal process. So at this point, it's just allegations.
Well, and what I said earlier was like, and I don't know if this is always the case, but this kind of thing, you have two all the way confirmed convictions, one other like trial accusation, and then you have other people that didn't go through all the court proceedings. There must be countless victims.
And I think it's notable too that like some of the people that testified talked about their fear around testifying and why they didn't, because I think the crimes at this point are like 20 some odd years old, so this happened a long time ago, and why they didn't come forward sooner and their fear around that.
A lot of that's classic, like fear of retribution, fear of like losing your entire career.
Anytime you have someone that's like deeply ingrained in like a church or a community group, and like all your friends, all your family are around that group, and then you have a situation like this where, you know, you're like speaking out against a member of that group, I think that's an incredibly difficult situation.
Were his accusers some members?
Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe even many of them were members. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I think the two people that the convictions came from both were former members of the Church of Scientology. So there's some stuff around that as well, and there's like testimony that you can read about where they talk about kind of their feelings around that.
So that's the background, but that's not actually why we are recording this and like talking about it.
Yeah, so I think like we've been talking about it, just the two of us.
We've heard it, you know, snippets here and there. Like we've been like, oh my gosh, like months ago I was like, well, that sounds really messed up. He probably did it. You know what I mean? Like, and here we are. Like.
Yep, here we are with convictions.
Yeah.
So not just allegations, convictions. And then a couple days ago, a day or two, it hasn't been long, it came out that a number of people, some celebrities, had written letters supporting Danny Masterson's character in advance of his sentencing.
He's an exceptional individual, if you believe them.
Yeah, so...
Leader, a role model. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, two of those people are Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, which is really unfortunate, because I think prior to this, it's not like... I mean, I wasn't like fans of theirs, but...
I was kind of annoyed by Ashton in particular, but both of them vaguely. But also, like,
but they're fine, right?
Not that, like, I wasn't like, these people are dirt bags.
Right.
You know? Like, that's...
Right. But then you read some of what they said in these letters, and it is pretty awful knowing that they wrote them after he had been convicted and prior to his sentencing. So at this point, they know that he's been convicted of 2 counts of R-word against 2 individuals, and they know that there was a third that was mistrialed. Some of the stuff that they said in their letters were things like vouching for Masterson's quote-unquote exceptional character, which I'm just really not sure how you can possibly write after you know that someone has been accused of, not even convicted of, but accused of something as heinous as what he was accused of by multiple people at that point. I don't know how you can write that on paper, but that's what they wrote. Some other things that Ashton Kutcher wrote in this letter, called Danny Masterson a role model. Also said that he always treated people with decency, equality, and generosity.
That's like an insane amount of praise to give someone who is convicted of crimes like that.
Yeah.
And on so many levels.
Yeah.
Like,
it's pretty gross.
So, and they're not even, so in that letter, they're not even saying, we don't believe he did it. They're saying, sure, maybe he did. They're not getting into that. But I guess the implication there could be, they don't care whether or not it's true. And maybe even accepting that these things happened, and he's going to jail for years of his life regardless. But that you should keep in mind, though, that he is a exceptional person, a role model.
Yeah. He also says, this is all Ashton Kutcher, right? Also says, Masterson is an extraordinarily honest and intentional human being.
He's great.
I don't know, like, I don't know how you do that.
I don't know.
And, like, look at yourself in the mirror. And there's some stuff floating around Reddit, like conspiracy theories around why Ashton Kutcher may or may not have written this.
Yeah.
And some of that is coming out of Chrissy Bixler's response to this, which we'll talk about in a second.
It's kind of blown up a little bit in some small circles, but it's not really taken off too much.
No, it's weird how much it hasn't taken off quickly, and I guess that's like how slow even like celebrity, like, kind of gossip sites, like Page Six and TMZ, how slow that is compared to, like, TikTok, Instagram, things like that.
Yeah.
That's so much faster.
Yeah, we saw it on Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit picked stuff up really fast, too. And they picked it up really quickly. And then Mila Kunis, similarly, she says he has a caring nature, ability to offer guidance, an amazing friend and confidant.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've never been in this situation before. I don't know what it's like to have someone that you considered a friend have this type of conviction. But once someone has been convicted of something like this, unless you think that something really went horribly wrong in terms of, like, the justice system's response, I don't know how you do this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to note that people that do things like this very carefully curate their images and the way they treat other people except for their victims.
Yeah.
Their victims see the brunt of their most heinous character, and everybody else sees a glowing, positive, helpful force. Sometimes they use that image and as a way to groom victims, as a way, so even he had these victims, and to call him a role model in that feels like particularly disgusting. Like, because, like, was he a role model to these women? I mean, I don't know the specifics. Maybe you don't do, but, like, was he much older than them? Was he obviously had a power thing because, like, because he is famous from a very popular TV show.
Well, and something that I think both people that he was convicted of committing this crime against, both of them had said that he had, like, a higher position than them within the Church of Scientology, right? So very
hierarchical structure. If you want to look into it, like, there's a very
pretty strong power dynamic difference. And then the fact too that, I mean, he's pretty famous. Like, he was on that '70s show. I think pretty much everyone. I didn't even watch the show, and I recognize him as someone who was on that '70s show.
Absolutely.
So either late last night, early this morning.
I think it was yesterday. Maybe last night.
Yesterday at some point. Chrissy Bixler went on her Instagram and posted...
Spilling some tea.
Yeah, posted a response to Ashton and Mila that are, I think, shocking to say the least.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read it, and then we'll just pop it up on screen. So
I woke her up at, like, 7 o'clock. I was like, you have to read this. This is insane.
Yeah. And I would say, too, before even reading this, like, how much, like, guts it takes for her to go through the legal process for this and stick up for herself the way that she has, and then to put this on Instagram, like, just an incredibly strong person to do all of this, and, like,
she's probably going
impressive.
through some shit right now, and like there's like that like, wow, he's actually been convicted, and they're doing sentencing, but also, like, she, if you believe her, went through the same stuff and then didn't get justice herself.
Yes.
So she's feeling probably all sorts of ways.
Oh yeah, it's got to be
positive, negative,
relieving,
just, like,
and also, like, deeply disappointing.
Yeah, for sure.
And, like, I don't even know how that might feel. But yeah, so here's what she posted on Instagram. Dear Ashton, I know the secrets your role model keeps for you, ones that would end you. Did you forget I was there? You were on speakerphone the night you called Danny on February 21st, 2001. I heard everything. I heard the plan. In my opinion, you're just as sick as your mentor. We'll talk about that in a second. Dear Mila, I pray you begin to process what you experienced as a child on that set. Your old interviews are very telling. I encourage everyone to watch them and decide for yourself what you hear and see. Do so before they get scrubbed from the internet. I also know what happened in Toronto and after. Question. If that's what you view as a normal relationship with a big brother figure, then I feel very sad for you, and I hope you consider getting into therapy. You all must forget I was there the whole time those first 5 years of that '70s show. I remember everything. So...
That is... intense.
Like, chilling.
It's honestly. Chilling. I read that and I was like, ooh, I didn't even know all the details. Like, I knew Masterson convicted, you know.
So immediately, right, the question is, like, what is February 21st, 2001? And February 21st, 2001 is the day that Ashton Kutcher's girlfriend was murdered.
Yep.
So essentially what happened is that Kutcher was showing up to her apartment to pick her up to go out on a date. And she didn't answer the door. The story is that he saw what he thought was spilled wine on the ground and just thought it had been from like a party previously and left. She was then found murdered, I think the next morning.
Probably viciously, I don't know the details, but like,
yeah.
I mean, the Hollywood Ripper, right?
Yeah, so she was found murdered by a serial killer the next morning.
Yeah. And ostensibly that night was already murdered.
Was already dead. Yeah, that night when he showed up. So, the official story is that he, went to try and open the door of her apartment. The door wasn't open, and he left, and then he reached out to LAPD because he was afraid that his DNA was going to be found on the door handle, and that then they would think that he had done it.
Yeah, he reached out after he found out that she had been murdered.
Right.
He was like, oh my gosh, I didn't do it. Like, I just have the DNA on the door handle. Which, if he is dating her, it's not the craziest thing to think that he would have DNA on the handle or even in the apartment, but still, you know, kind of weird, but kind of plausible, I guess.
Right. So, the insinuation, I don't think, some people are like, is the insinuation that he killed her? I don't think so. Like, I think that it is well known that it was the serial killer that killed her. I don't think that there's any question.
I didn't look at any of the details of that, so I don't personally, but like, I'm not here to just suddenly be like, Ashton Kutcher's is the Ripper, or killed his girlfriend, staged it as the Ripper, or whatever, you know.
I think the implication that people have, and then there's a person on YouTube, his account is called Growing Up in Scientology, and he is claiming to know the details of what happened, and his claim, and I think what it sounds like Christy Bixler is getting at, is that Ashton Kutcher knew that she was dead. So, opened the door, went into the apartment.
Found her
either dead or dying, and left.
Panicked,
freaked out, panicked, called Danny Masterson, and left. And that would be the thing that he did that was so not having anything to do with, her murder, but just, what happened in the aftermath. Lying about what happened in the aftermath.
Which, lying to the police itself is a crime.
Sure.
Especially when you're talking about investigating a murder. Of somebody that you're close to.
Right. And then I think the implication is that Danny Masterson allegedly helped Ashton Kutcher figure out how to navigate this, difficult circumstance. Anyway...
I mean, to certain people.
Super weird to not see this more widely reported on. I don't know if that's because given, the nature of, the, accusation, it's heavy enough that some of these places are wanting to investigate it before they publish it.
They don't want to get, slapped with any, shut the F up kind of...
Right. I don't think Christy Bixler's Instagram is verified, so I think that's maybe the other thing, making sure that is her, something like that.
Something we haven't done.
I don't know. It's all, something we definitely haven't done. Yeah. It's all, it's speculation, right? But just pretty huge. And then I think the implication also from that is that it is possible, and some people have this theory that it's possible that, Ashton Kutcher felt compelled to write a letter in support of Danny Masterson because theoretically he would have dirt on Ashton Kutcher. I mean, I think it's pretty common for people to feel like they're backed into a corner where they have to do something. I mean, it's almost it's hard though, because that's almost my preference would be that's because that would mean, right, that Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis aren't such terrible people that they're supporting a convicted, R-word or
a heinous criminal.
A criminal, right? Yeah. They're not supporting someone that is convicted of crimes like these. It would mean
of their own will, of their own desire.
They feel backed into a corner to do it.
Which is theoretically if that's the case, makes them seem better.
It's also, though, when you look at stuff like, if you think about, like, Bill Cosby and how many people continue, I mean, to this day, to support him. Yeah. After all of the convictions, like,
after all the things he's even said, you know what I mean? Like, admitted to his jokes and routines. Like,
so it's very possible that they're just, like, that's the side that they've chosen.
They knew him for years. Well, and then I mean, we mentioned Topher before, and then I've seen some people talking about, like, Wilder Valderrama is a bit of a weirdo too, and we're not going to talk about him, but a lot of people are saying like Topher Grace got a lot of flack for not being part of the friend group after the show ended, and now some people are like, okay, maybe he's the only decent one there. Yeah. Which, given the way this is spilling out, I don't know the guy. I haven't followed him since.
I don't know any of these people.
I don't know any of these people, but like, and I mean that specifically. Like, I haven't watched any of his stuff. I haven't followed what he's done since. But like, I'm seeing what's happening here with the Danny, Mila, like Ashton circle, and it feels really grotesque. And I can see somebody being like seeing some weird things, hearing some weird things, feeling uncomfortable a few times, and never wanting to talk to them again. Yeah. And like, now he seems like one of the most, and also his wife, Topher's wife, recently posted a thing in support of victims of these SA crimes. Yeah. So like obviously they have feelings. They have strong feelings about that, and I wonder how much they've seen or suspected over the years, and probably distanced themselves because of that.
Well, and I think too, like, I'd read just that, and again, like, pure speculation, but that Danny was just kind of an asshole to Topher, like, on the set. So, like, he didn't want to spend time around him because he was, like, Topher was being bullied.
A bully.
Right.
Fine role model.
Right. Yeah. And then Topher got this reputation as, like, being stuck up, pretentious. Mm-hmm. I mean, none of this, it doesn't mean that he's not.
He
still could be.
He could be.
Right. Yeah. But I would prefer stuck up and pretentious to someone convicted of, like, SA-related crimes. Yeah. Personally. That's what I'd rather surround myself with. Yeah.
Well, do you have more that you wanted to dive into with that? Or?
I think that's the bulk of, like, kind of the
where
facts.
It stands today. Yeah. I guess. Like, this is, like recent stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine, given the, like, intensity of, like, the allegation that Chrissy Bixler made on her Instagram, that there'll be more.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's like what you're saying, where like bigger people or bigger accounts or bigger like news or whatever, or even like the gossip stuff is like taking a minute to double check and verify some of the stuff to report on it.
I did see that, like, right before we started talking about this and started filming this, Hollywood Reporter had picked it up and was reporting on it. So my hunch is it's going to open the floodgates, and you're going to have like all of, like, BuzzFeed, Page 6. Daily Mail.
Heard it here first.
TMZ. Well, probably not. But at this point, no. At this point, you've heard it literally
cutting edge
everywhere else first.
Okay,
but
right. Sorry,
I just I think it opens up, like, an interesting question about like, how do you feel about, if you were in this situation, how you would choose, like, who would you choose to support? So if you have a friend. Someone you've worked with, someone you've been around a lot, you've had really good interactions with them, and then multiple people come out and say that this person is abusive, has, like, committed acts of violence against people. Yeah. Like, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about them if they're convicted of those crimes? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you navigate something like that?
Statistically speaking, you're likely to support the abuser. And everybody wants to be that person that is like, oh, you know, I'm always going to support the truth or the victims. Statistically speaking, you're not. We're not. Most people aren't. Yeah. Unless you have a very strong commitment to supporting victims that sometimes might seem untrustworthy or unlikely or whatever it is. Unless you have a very strong commitment to that, you're probably going to support the abuser. Well, almost every time. And
it's hard because just by the nature of it, like, even in the legal system, like, victims they attempt to discredit victims because it means that their testimony isn't as strong. So if you say...
It's a tactic.
if you say that this person isn't reliable, if you say that this person has lied before, or has
they have mental health issues, which may or may not stem from the thing you're talking about, but like,
or they have something that is considered like publicly unsavory that's happened in the past. They participated in sex work. I mean, they've ever had any issue with drugs or alcohol. Like, there are all these things that people do to discredit victims and say their stories aren't valid. Yeah. And it's like
it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
And
it's rough.
Well, and then you have the ever-present false accusations, which do occur sometimes at incredibly low rates. Incredibly low rates. Yeah. And a lot of people talk about this, especially in the circles we're in as well, but there is often fallout from accusations. It's often the accusers who are often accurately reporting on the abuse that they've experienced, the ones that had their lives ruined for this stuff. So even though there's this massive fear of like false accusations leading to people's like downfall or their lives ruined, like that almost never happens. Yeah. But that's still the fear. That's still and you're talking like, so you have like so many people are more afraid of that than of being a victim of a false accusation than they are of like accidentally supporting a victim or something, or you know what I mean, like you're more, you support a victim in almost any situation. You're most like, if you play the bets, if you play the numbers, like you say, like in like gambling, you want to play the numbers because it's your most likely chance to like actually win, right? If you're playing the numbers with like allegations of abuse or assault or whatever, if you play the numbers, you're supporting the victim almost every time. Yeah. That's not where people fall. Like it's unfortunate. I don't know. We'll see if anything comes of this, but that's pretty intense stuff. I don't follow a lot of, honestly, like celebrity gossip or like, but I guess this is different though. It's a court case.
This isn't gossip.
It's not gossip. It's crimes. It's court cases. It's accountability. Right. And it's power. I mean, it should be noted. Ashton Kutcher. I looked up his net worth. It's $200 million. Yeah. He's made a lot of good investments and early investments of like Skype and Uber and whatnot. He has a lot of money. And he has a very clean image. Apparently, he and Mila Kunis have a support for SA survivors. Like they have an organization that helps support people, and then they're writing this letter. But like I look back at it and I'm like, there's like this huge power element in this. Yeah. There's like the scrubbing of your image. There's like I don't know. We're talking about like how do we navigate these things in the day to day, because it impacts all of us.
I think that's where it's like it does such a disservice to call any of this celebrity gossip, or to think that thinking about this kind of stuff and talking about it isn't a worthwhile endeavor, because I think you really do have to know, like, what would I do? Like, what do I think is right? What's happening? And if this were happening in my life, like, how would I navigate something like this? How would I want to? And then what would be the pressures to do something different than that?
I think in my own experiences, and we're not going to go too far into them, but as a teacher, we've talked about this at length, but when I was teaching, I was very conflicted, and it was like hearing the students' words about certain people. There was one very prominent anti-racist person that I worked with that was accused of being a racist. And I look back on it and I'm like, like the very like curated image, but like engaging in racist activity one way or another. And then another like teacher that I worked with that students said was scary and made them feel uncomfortable. And like, it wasn't like it didn't sound like any sort of like anything related to like this Masterson type thing, but like yelled at or like belittled, or you know what I mean? Like specifically this one person over and over again, I heard about like how uncomfortable they made students feel. And I'm like, and I was like, at the time, there's like hold the line, the wall. It's like you don't cross over that. You don't trust students. You trust your coworkers. You trust the people that are in it with you. Yeah. And I was conflicted in the moment, and since getting out of it, and very shortly as I was getting out of it, I looked at those moments and I was like, wow, this is so messed up. Like, who do you believe?
And I think in general, like for me at least, I feel like I every time want to be able to examine the power structure, and in general I'm going to side with the person that is in the situation where someone else has power over them, rather than the person in the position of power. Because power is incredibly corrupting. A lot of this that we're talking about, like acts of SA, a lot of other crimes are committed like people say,
financial abuse,
for power,
manipulation,
you know, to gain more power over someone else. To me, it is much more suspect when someone is claims to be victimized and they're clearly the person in the position of power over the person they claim is abusing them.
Yep. The power structure almost always leads you there.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, and sometimes it's a little unconventional, but like if you look at a lot of factors of like wealth, like societal status, like positions of authority, and that's kind of like this Masterson thing. Like, you check all the boxes. You talk about the fraud circle, or the fraud triangle, but you check enough of these boxes, and it leads to the thing. You get all the boxes checked. There's probably fraud. You get all these boxes checked in an abuse situation where there's an allegation. There's probably abuse. This is probably coming from the person that's the lower powers.
And fraud and abuse go hand in hand, right? So when you're talking about a fraud triangle, you might as well like extrapolate that to an abuse triangle. And one of the big things there is opportunity. So like, can you do the thing that people have said that you've done? Is there an opportunity for you to do it? If you're in a position of power, there is an opportunity for you to be abusive to someone that you're in a position of power over. That exists there, so automatically that's like a box that's checked. You know what I mean? So it's I don't know. I just, for me, that's the direction that I'm always going to look at, and in these cases, like that's the direction of where things are going. You have Danny Masterson clearly in a position of power over these people that have accused him of SA and he's now been convicted of. And like, that's where like I believe them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, conviction alone is legally saying that it happened, but
but
beyond that, like, so this is where you're like, oh, then you go back to the does Mila and Ashton just think that he's innocent? Well, you look at the power angle, the conviction, all of it leads to he did it. You know what I mean? Like,
it doesn't mean always. I mean, there's always going to be examples where like that isn't what happened, and there's something that's very strange that's like kind of outside that box.
There are always exceptions.
Always exceptions, right? But it's interesting to think about like what would you do? And then like, how do you feel about what like Mila and Ashton have done?
I think what would you do, and also what have you done? Like in yourself, maybe with like people close to you that know situations, like talk about those things. That's the important part, is like, because like I reflect, and I'm like, and then I immediately think like where have I gone wrong?
Right.
I've gone wrong. And I want to make sure that I don't go wrong in the future, and that I support the truth, which is, you know, who's the real victim and like all that. I don't know. Stuff's always coming out though, and hopefully a chapter is closing here, but.
Yeah, I did read that Danny Masterson is planning to appeal his conviction.
Of course. Why wouldn't he?
So we'll see what happens with that, because technically there's space legally for him to
throw out the whole thing.
Yeah.
You said the one was a mistrial with Chrissy, right?
Yeah. And I don't really know. I didn't look into it. And I don't understand enough about the legal system to know whether she has any like ability to like have that trial again, you know, like have a retrial.
I don't know mistrials and retrials.
I don't know. I don't know. But I know that I read something where she had talked to someone and said that like civilly she can move forward.
Yeah, that was like the there was like a Trump thing related recently where like somebody couldn't go through, but she won a civil suit against Trump for the R word, right? Yeah. And so civilly, like.
And then they have to, I think generally it's like monetary compensation then versus jail time.
Yep. I wish all the victims the best, you know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. I'm sure it's like big emotions for all the people that were involved. And then, you know, like whatever comes out of this in terms of his appeals and stuff like that. We'll just have to see. Because I think those processes are long too.
Yeah, they are. This has already been years long.
Right.
And then I would imagine the Ashton and Mila just kind of ignoring this comment unless it gets really blown up, in which case there'll be a really PC, well-curated PR team response, like they've done nothing but support, and you know, like and remember that they run this support system for SA victims or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like there's gonna be like a very like corporate sort of like. I mean, he's basically a corporation at this point with all of his money and all of his investments and stuff. So I wouldn't expect anything like super big to come out because there's not like an investigation. It's just words online. But it makes you wonder, words with truth, probably.
I wonder too if recently something like this happened where someone, and I can't remember what I can't even remember what case it was, but someone had written a letter for someone who was convicted of some kind of crime, and they had written a letter supporting them, and it was like a celebrity. So and then like the press got a hold of it, and they had said they never intended on the letter being public. So I also wonder whether or not Mila and Ashton and all of the other people, because it's my understanding it was a lot.
Co-stars. It was the mom and dad, I think, that acted on that show.
I think I read that it was like 20 people.
Oh, many people.
Not just from that 70s show, but like people outside of that that wrote him like
recommendations.
Like character recommendations, right? And character references.
Ugh.
I wonder if that was part of it. I wonder if they knew that those were going to be made public when they wrote them.
Mm-hmm. And then suddenly somebody, like, I don't know who did this, but like somebody drums it up and then, oh, look at this stuff. Anybody following the case would
always public, or like I'm not really sure. I didn't look into like how people got the letters, but they're available to read if you want to see all of the different things that Danny Masterson's friends and family had to say positive about him. I don't know if for like mental health reasons I would suggest that anyone read through those, but
oh man, if you're a victim of anything even close to this, it's like be careful.
Yeah. Just like be careful with your own mental health.
Trigger warnings all over.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, subscribe, comment.
Right. This was heavy.
That was heavy. Man. So what do we do? I mean, it's not always going to be this heavy. Thank you for watching. Like, if you have, like, any thoughts or feelings about the whole thing, like, feel free to, like, talk about how you know, how you're approaching this, and everything.
Yeah.
Just keep it civil, you know.
And I'd say, too, like, our opinions are just our opinions. Like, we're not experts in any of this. Probably pretty clear from the way we're talking about it that we're not experts in any of it. So,
I mean, get bits and pieces, though.
Everyone's entitled to, like, their opinion as long as it's respectful of other people.
Yep. How many outros are we going to do here? Alright, we're done.